Welcome everybody to the second episode of the Tech Talk series with, let's see where I have my presentation.
Who are we?
Yeah, exactly. Who are we? I start because I'm on the left-hand side. I'm Fredrik Brattstig, tech evangelist at IGEL. I'm also in my first year as an MVP and in my third year as an NVIDIA vGPU community advisor. And Jeff, who are you?
And I'm Jeff Kahlberg, principal technology evangelist here at IGEL, which Frederick and I say we get to hear ourselves talk a lot. Been around the IGEL product this is my 20th year at this point. So I've been here for a while and glad to be here.
Sounds good. I'm only at my 7th year, but I'm catching up.
Yes, you are.
So
what are we? I think it might be real good here. When we did this last time, we talked a lot about this whole series has to do with end computing, the RX 420 and IGEL OS on ARM and how that works. And when we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, the conversation was all about the device, the physical device, why it matters now, where maybe a few years ago it wasn't quite ready for prime time. We talked about the platform differences, the ports and the history of ARM and such. And I think that was pretty good, but the focus was really on the hardware.
And we looked inside.
And we did. You took the cover off, as I recall.
Yeah.
You showed people there was a little foil emblem on there that you had to get rid of, and you had to take off a foot, and there were 2 screws, and you could open it up, but that could void the warranty.
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, let's just get to it. I mean,
yeah,
these are the only slides we have, so.
Yeah, well, it is pretty much the only slide we had. And we were going to really talk about where, oh my gosh, my screen just went crazy. Hold on one second. We're going to talk about, last time was on the hardware. So now what we're going to talk about is IGEL OS. The IGEL operating system has been around for quite some time, okay? And as we know, it's evolved, but ARM as a platform for IGEL is new, and for us, it's not the first time we did ARM. We did cover this. We did an ARM product about 6 years ago, but ARM wasn't quite ready to go. But there are significant differences between IGEL OS on Intel versus IGEL OS on ARM, and I think what we want to do is we want to take an opportunity here to talk about what those differences are. That's the focus of today's session, is to say, okay, what can we do today on ARM, okay, that we can't do on Intel, and perhaps more importantly, what can we do on Intel that we can't do on ARM? So with that being said, maybe we should talk about the fact that the hardware is different and there are different processors. We often talk about x86 versus ARM, the ARM architecture, but it's really not x86, it's 64-bit x86. And for the purists, it's really not x86 64 or 64 x86, it's really AMD 64. And do you remember why it's AMD 64, Frederick?
Because I believe that the instruction set was invented by AMD in the beginning.
That is correct.
For 64 bits.
For 64-bit.
Yeah.
And I remember that 64-bit, there's extensions. It was a funny thing because I recall that Intel ended up licensing the 64-bit extensions from AMD, whereas of course the x86 was originally Intel and AMD was licensing that from Intel. So they're really quite interesting. And of course, ARM today is really not ARM 64. It's really, the architecture is referred to as ARM architecture 64. And if you look at and it's referred to, at least in the Linux community, and I believe most places, it's ARCH 64 would be its proper name, I suppose. So Other hardware differences, Frederick, were the fact that the whole Intel world grew up with this thing called a BIOS, or what we refer to today as a legacy BIOS.
Yeah.
And legacy because we've moved into something called UEFI, which is an improved new version of BIOS, if you will.
Yeah.
But then there's also this concept of CMOS. Why are these differences important?
I mean, the differences between the two devices, between the legacy BIOS and the UEFI, I mean, there is the legacy BIOS was very limited in terms of what you could do.
Yeah.
And then you came up with a UEFI, which allows you to do to overcome those hurdles. Honestly, I have no really good example.
The only one I can remember is this, and of course I have my little device right here. I'm holding up my screen. Is the fact that all these years, if I wanted to make a change to a device, there was a piece of software, a BIOS, okay, that I could interrupt basically and go in and configure a device to do different things. Like I could press a key during the boot process, and I could interrupt that boot process and get into this kind of pre-configuration stuff. Well, when I moved into there is no such thing. I mean, there is a BIOS essentially to get started, but there's no CMOS. There's no way. There's no battery backup. There's no configuration of the hardware that you can actually get to and manipulate. Right.
Yep.
So I think it was an important point for people that are looking at the device and understanding how the operating system works, because there is an IGEL pre-boot that people know they could interrupt when the device starts to boot. They can press the escape key and get to that IGEL pre-boot, start in an emergency mode or reset a device to factory defaults and do some other things. There's no way to do that when we're talking about the ARM devices. So what we can do though is we can use this little button on the top, and we can control how long you hold that button and how many times you press that button. And we could do different things. So one of the differences between IGEL OS for Intel and IGEL OS for ARM is the fact that we've programmed to use this button using some GPIO pins that were provided by N Computing through their little daughter board, and that allows us to get into and access the IGEL pre-boot menu and some of the functions that are there. I think the other big difference is, I think you probably show this on the screen, is we were talking about the major software differences. Once IGEL OS is up and running, what can you do with it? And probably the first thing to talk about would be is going to be the kinds of sessions that we can run.
Exactly.
So I think you're going to share your desktop. On your desktop, you're sharing two different versions.
Yeah, I do. I believe you can see my screen, and you should see two VNC sessions running currently. Is that correct?
It looks like it to me, yes.
Perfect. So the one on the top is an IGEL UD7 device using the regular x86 64-bit version of IGEL OS. And the one on the bottom is an RX 440 powered by IGEL, the N Computing device. And that's it. So they are about the same, I would say.
So
there is actually a difference.
I do see one difference.
Yeah.
I thought it was odd. I noticed this, and then you pointed it out, and that is on the I think on the ARM device, the speaker is to the left of the network indicator, and on the AMD device, or the x86 device, it is the other way around.
Yeah.
So is that how we're going to tell people to be able to tell the difference between the two systems? I can see the calls to the help desk. What is your device? I don't know. It says, well, where is the speaker indicator? Anyway.
That's cool. So of course, if you open up the About dialog in the Start menu, you will certainly see which kind of device you have and which firmware versions and so on. And that's kind of interesting. It's not part of today, but anyways, the IGEL OS 11 on x86 is up on version 11.05, while the ARM version is on 11.01. They might.
Yeah, that's confusing.
Very much.
And underneath there, though, of course, we do see a little indication of exactly what the product is, and I think that's important.
Exactly. And as I'm using a RX 440, which is brand new, I think it's about to be available to the market kind of now. But the about dialog box does still say that it's an RX 420. The difference is 2 or 4 gigabytes of RAM.
Gotcha.
So anyways, let's have a look at the IGEL setup.
Yeah.
And see how the setup determines if we can determine which kind of device we are on based on the setup. And by the first view, except for the top text, there is no differences. But if we start to open up the sessions piece, for instance.
And sessions, of course, would define what we can do with the device, more or less.
Yeah, which connections we have to other remoting environments or equivalents. And here we see immediately quite a big difference. Where we on the Pi, if I may say so, we have basically Citrix, SSH, and Chromium browser. Session summary and global session options is kind of global settings, so to speak. But on the Pi, it's a Citrix folder, SSH, and Chromium browser. While on the x86-based machine, we see loads of other sessions. Not loads, but quite a few more. Why?
Well, as I recall, you know, some of these solutions that are out there from, say, VMware and Microsoft and other, I mean, they've not come to market with mature products that run on ARM.
Yeah.
We know that they're working on them, and but things like PowerTerm and some of these other solutions that are out there for connecting to AS400s and mainframes and such, they don't exist on ARM. So we will not see those in IGEL OS. If any of those organizations come forth with a solution, obviously that would be something we would evaluate. I think we'll talk about that in our brief discussion of roadmap. But
yeah.
So
I mean, Citrix was kind of pioneers in the Pi area where the Raspberry Pi got introduced. So Citrix was quite early on the train. And so, as you said, it's the most mature client for ARM. And so that's why we focused on including this one.
Yeah, I can recall it was, I think, almost 7 years ago when we did our first ARM device, which, you know, was, I think, too early in the evolution of processors for the desktop, and Citrix was there. So, you know, the Citrix client on ARM is definitely very mature. So
yeah. So expanding Citrix, we see about the same layout.
Yeah,
you want to go down this path now, or should we go?
No. You know, next session is all going to be all about Citrix, and we can talk about the features that are there. So suffice it to say, I think the main thing we say about IGEL OS on ARM versus IGEL OS on Intel is, you know, this is a really, really good. I mean, Citrix is it, and this product is focused on Citrix. So.
Yeah. So let's fold it together again.
Yeah. So what about that section called accessories?
Yeah.
And what you know, accessories are always kind of a weird thing, and I've always tried to explain them. Accessories are sessions, but they're sessions that are for the most part used to manage and control and reconfigure and work with the device. I just talked about the setup utility, what you're in right now. That's an accessory.
Yeah.
Those are pretty much identical, are they not?
Yeah, I would say so. There are a few differences in terms of what kind of accessories you have. So if we scroll through the list, you will see login Pi, which is actually not Pi in terms of Raspberry
Good
Pi.
point.
We do not have a login Pi here. It's there is a agent needed that is only as existing for
So login VSI, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
You configure that, and then you can use login VSI to kind of stress and model up use of devices and to kind of stress your backend server environment to make sure it's properly configured.
Exactly. We have speech write.
Yep.
That's a new feature, I believe. I honestly, I have never been playing around with it. You know, Jeff?
I don't know. I've not played around with it myself. So that is a brand new feature that I've not had time to look into.
Yeah.
So, but same situation is the sessions. The fact that we have login Pi on Intel and we don't have it on the ARM devices because login VSI hasn't developed an agent for ARM. To my knowledge.
Or if they have, then at least we haven't implemented it yet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
What about the user interface? Is that pretty much, now the user interface is all about screen resolutions and tools to manipulate the screen and wallpapers and language settings and keyboard settings. Are those for the most part identical?
I would say it looks spot on. We have display, desktop, language, screen lock, screensaver, input, hotkeys, and font services. We do not have the time to go through all of those, but certainly you have the possibility to do about the same thing.
So does that mean if I had profiles and if I was an IGEL user and I had a UMS and I had a profile governing the user interface and user configuration, that same profile would apply to all devices regardless of platform?
I would say I will not promise. But actually, it's kind of neat because let's see, how is it? Control F2. If we go for access control, for instance, and hit Control F2, then we'll see the different parameters that are represented within the registry of the IGEL device.
Yeah. Now
which means that all of those 7, 8, 9 entries are the same on the x86 and the ARM, but you cannot really be certain about it in the long run.
I like to be really well. I could sit here and say, "What Control F2? What is that?" And you know, it's an interesting feature inside IGEL setup on a device.
Yep.
And a lot of people are unaware of it. If you wanted to take a look at all the available options for a particular configuration setting and how they're defined internally, so it's nice that we show that.
Yeah. And it also tells you which are the default value if you have switched to something else, which you can also see through the GUI, of course.
I remember in the early days, and we talked a little bit about this last week, about some of the reasons that why ARM had not taken a hold in the industry. And one of the things at the time, because we didn't have a lot of secure connectors from the internet, one of the things that was necessary, and in some cases can still be necessary, is going to be VPNs. So in the case of network settings and such. Why don't we take a quick look there? I mean, I think for the most part, network is network. So the number of interfaces, wireless connections, wireless authentication, things like this, those are going to be common. But when it comes into the special software, if you will, that people might use to connect securely from a remote facility, VPN, so to speak, we don't see all the VPN clients on ARM that we see on Intel. So
exactly. We only have the OpenVPN, which from my understanding can connect to multiple different VPN solutions, though. One other thing that I pay attention to is the step clients. That one appears on both of the systems, which means that we can do 802.1x on.
Right. And SCEP is becoming more and more important in this security conscious world about allowing devices to connect to my network. And, you know, certificates, secure certificates is definitely is high on everybody's list and people's lists of access control methods. So
yeah,
good stuff. What else do we have? That's pretty much it. I think, you know, network drives, other things, routing, hosts, those have been around for 35 years. So we don't need to spend too much time on those things. What about under devices?
Devices, we go to the devices. So
there are differences here.
Yeah, you have unified communications on the IGEL x86 platform.
But we don't. Well, that unified communication is pretty important.
Yes, but those are for locally running agents, I guess.
So this is if I'm running, say for example, Cisco WebEx in a remoted environment. I can't do that locally. I can't do that with the ARM device because there's no Cisco agent, if you will, for VDI for ARM.
Yeah.
Or if there is, we haven't implemented it, as you said before. But I don't think there is. And this is we did a video some time ago about Teams, and we can talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about Citrix specifically. Yep. But Citrix does a really, really good job of webcam optimization, which allows us to do Teams with an ARM device, so without offloading it. So good stuff here. Printing, was there anything under printing?
I believe so.
Standard printing support for things like cups and LPR and LPD printing.
Yeah. So basically, cups, for you that doesn't know, cups is the regular way to map a printer to and bring that printer to a Citrix session or RDP session, or actually on the BVDs, on the x86 side, also to BVD session currently.
Well, and it is the common Unix printing system. So
exactly, and also for local access to the printer.
Yep.
Of course. But there are differences, and we are lacking ThinPrint and PrintLogic on the ARM side.
Okay.
Basically the same thing as Login Pi. We are not aware of an ARM version of this software.
What about, so we're getting conscious of the time here. What about the security side of things? Pretty much the same across the board, as I recall. But probably, you know, one of the things that we've supported for years, okay, is the libraries to decrypt and some of the to take a look at decrypt some of the smart cards and certificates that people might have on smart cards and other things. So the middleware is important. And when we look at what we have on Intel versus what we have on ARM, not all of the middleware that's available on an Intel instruction set is available on ARM. So when we look in this section, we can see there's certain things, for example, that I don't think CoolKey or some of these have been ported over, or if they have, we haven't implemented them yet. A CoolKey is. Your screen's so tiny I can't read it hardly.
I'm sorry. What is actually quite cool is that we have this option, custom PKCS11 module.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
As soon as a middleware arrives to the ARM platform, you can basically just push it to the device and point it out and utilize that PKCS11 module.
That's a really good point. And I can remember using this years ago back in my days when I was in the field, that we would have a specific cryptographic library that we need to have pushed out there. We would copy it into WFS, for example, and then point to it. And then we would be able to decrypt specific smart cards and such without having to integrate it into the IGEL OS. It's just a way to be able to push your own out there. That's good. What about the system section? Anything significant under system that we need to worry about between the two platforms?
So the only difference that I can spot is at least the features. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Which makes sense because the amount of features on the Pi side is way less. So on the x86, you have loads of features which you can turn on and off if you want to. And on the Pi side, you have just a few. But I want to do an advertisement of this current version that I'm using, 11.01.111, is a new private build that is, I think we are going to release it quite soon to the public as a private build, of course. If you have the need for Philips dictation, it's now implemented in the IGEL OS for ARM. So you can use your dictation devices and the buttons and whatever, a healthcare thing.
Fantastic. So since we've gone through this, features are kind of a good segue into, we wanted to talk a little bit about the roadmap. I mean, we would talk about the fact that when we look at the ARM device, I mean, we're real pleased that I mean, it's a Citrix device. Citrix is the dominant player in virtual desktops and applications, and vast support all around the world in terms of what they do, and it is implemented so well. IGEL, and we'll talk about this in our next session, but IGEL and Citrix, have committed to have day one support. So when a new version of the Citrix Workspace app comes out, we want it to be available on IGEL OS the same day for people who need to get that or want to get that. So that's a big focus. It'll continue to be the focus. All of it, when it comes to developing the ARM product, it's all about delivering Citrix. If and when, VMware, Microsoft, Zoom, Cisco, I mean, we talked to Zoom, talked to Cisco, know where Microsoft stands. We know what VMware is doing. It's no big secret, but one day if these guys come up with something, we'll look at it. But right now for us, the focus is Citrix. It's stable. The performance is awesome, continues to be awesome. And the RX 420 with IGEL OS handles it perfectly. So it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add on that roadmap idea, that concept?
No, I mean, we are Citrix focused for this operating system, and that's how it is. So changes will change over time, but yeah, let's see. It's too early to give any promises.
Yep. So that being said, we're reaching the end of our time here, but we do want to, if anybody has any questions, maybe they can pop them in the chat. We can respond to them. And we'll give people a minute or so to type something in there.
Exactly. And to advertise a bit in 2 weeks, we are going to do the third episode. And we are going to talk about, what are we going to talk about?
Well, it's going to be an in-depth look into how the Citrix Workspace app and the Workspace Hub, and specifically both, are supported by IGEL OS on ARM.
Should we try to do some live demos?
Ooh, we could try to do a live demo.
I can try. Yeah, I will play around with it.
All right.
Maybe I can even share my phone.
That's right. With the Workspace Hub, I've seen you do that. I've done it too. So
awesome.
All right. Well, I think that no questions here. So either we answered them all ahead of time. So maybe that's a good thing. So,
yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We enjoy talking about this. If you have any questions, you can send an email to ncomputing@igel.com, and it'll show up in our inboxes, and we'll respond to you. And I guess that will wrap it up for the day.
Yeah.
Frederick,
Thank you so much.
it's good chatting with you as always.
As always, Jeff. Have a good evening
You
or
too.
day or whatever it might be.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.